Okay, so in this audio here, I couldn't really think of a good background to put behind it, and I don't really have many to work with. So I decided to keep it real simple and to just kind of do it kind of fuzzy in the dark, whatever. And this one is called the Seven Principles of Reality. Um, it's a little bit more than seven principles of reality, but the basic point was to create a video that kind of summarized my whole philosophical kind of thing in a real summary. I've written things on the internet under the blogger named G-Love, and I've put a number of videos under Ninpo Warrior G, the YouTube channel. So there's a lot of interesting ideas that I've developed over, over the last 20 years, but more in the last year or so, I've kind of put everything together. I got some of the keys that I needed to put everything together. So I'm just going to kind of briefly walk through them, hopefully very quickly, just to get the basic ideas out there, and then, people can think about it themselves and see what their perspective is. So what you start with is three basic principles, which I'm calling that the first principle. But basically, if you're going to do a philosophical description of reality, you have to start with three principles: awareness, information, and energy. These are the basic kind of philosophical principles that no matter what kind of system you're going to formulate, it's going to be based on these three principles. You may synthesize it down in different ways and work it any number of different ways, but you can't really describe reality without these three elements: awareness, information, and energy. Awareness is a spiritual principle. It's something you have to experience directly. Information and energy are, forces, substances that we can observe to whatever extents or degrees. So, another way to say this, which has been said in the past by the Tao Te Ching, is the Tao, yin and yang, yin and yang. So it's a similar this kind of formulation's been said in the past, maybe just not clearly defined in a way where we could understand the meaning of it. Now, the next principle is that there are expansive and contractive spin forces in nature. This basic idea is described very well by Walter Russell in his drawings. And it's basically the notion that you have forces that result in heavy or dense or contractive or concentrative kind of bringing together of forces and substances. And then you have these other forces that result in substances, flows that are light and diffuse and expansive and radiative. So that's another fundamental principle. So just to summarize the idea, you could not possibly have a Big Bang without a big crunch. So then the third principle is, after those two general principles, is the principle of magnetic spin frequencies. This kind of is a refinement of the other ideas, the principles of expansive, contractive spin forces, information, energy, so on. Magnetic spin frequencies are clockwise and anti-clockwise. And this whole theory is very described really well by Albert Roy Davis and Walter C. Rawls, or at least they kind of initiated it. And that was one of the keys that really opened my eyes to how everything fits together. An important thing to recognize with magnetic spin frequencies is that spin direction determines information. So the direction of the spin determines its information, and spin force defines energy. So energy is defined by spin force. So in fact, when you look at anything, any spin frequency, you can break it up into those two components of magnetic spin frequencies. You can break it up into those two components of information and energy, i.e. spin direction and spin force. And you can actually very precisely map out what information and energy are in nature, rather than some hypothetical or computational or, whatever. The fundamental principle of both of those principles, information and energy, is spin. Whether it's spin direction, which determines information content, or spin force, which determines or defines energy. And again, those spins are clockwise and anti-clockwise. Now, the next thing, the fourth principle, is alternating north and south magnetic spin frequencies. These magnetic spin frequencies are oriented three-dimensionally throughout space in alternating north-south magnetic spins. And that you can map it out horizontally, vertically, and basically essentially create a grid, that a magnetic grid of nature, of reality, that is just alternating north-south magnetic spins potentially at every point, whatever, or every area of space, however you define it or describe it. Now, these alternating north-south magnetic spin currents are based on magnetic particles, magnetic currents, I think they're based on magnetic particles. They definitely result in magnetic currents and magnetic waves, as well as you have the whole range of magnetic interactions. Also, you have the formation of magnetic structures and then magnetic networks, as well as just this larger kind of magnetic lattice that kind of underlies everything in nature. So, So then you have the fifth principle is you have three fundamental particles: magnetons, electrons, and photons. Magneton is, I think there's people who have misused that term and called it something that it's not. And there is I think I found a guy on the internet named Robert Sizov who actually theorized that there is an actual particle called a magneton, which I think is probably plausible. If you have two fundamental magnetic spins, clockwise, anti-clockwise, you have to have some sort of energy, substance, something. And that would more than likely be the magneton. So you have three fundamental particles: magnetons, electrons, and photons. Now, my basic theory is that the two magnetic spins of magnetons, clockwise and anti-clockwise, one of them releases electrons and one of them releases photons. Thus, one of the spins releases electricity and one generates or emits light. So that's the theory. Whether or not it's factual remains to be seen. The sixth principle is that within these, or due to these magnetic spin frequencies and these alternating north-south magnetic spins, and formed out of all of these fundamental particles, magnetons, electrons, photons, so on. But the magnetons being this fundamental magnetic spin frequency, kind of magnetic spin structure, if you will. What results is an electrophotonic, or what results are electrophotonic tonal structures. So you have this fundamental magnetic spin structures, but within them you have this electrophotonic tonal structures, which are more based on frequency. Electricity, photons, electrons, photons, and they form frequency. So that's electrophotonic tonal structures. And these kind of come together, and maybe it happens with magnetons as well, but they form, what results with these is there's the formation of spheres or envelopes, meaning like a membrane, like the equivalent to a cell or the skin on of a human being, and all these different, or even a soap bubble. You see it at all kinds of scales, on Earth, the sun, etc. So all these different spheres are formed, and then you have vortices, or this whole range of vortices, which are based on the more fundamental magnetic spins, but they're larger kind of vortexes that you see in nature. And then you have matrices, which are, again, these matrices, kind of like the, tree branches and tree roots and the kind of vein and artery structure, systems in human beings, these matrices basically form this kind of matrix of substance matrices that follow the more fundamental magnetic kind of lattice or network. So then the seventh principle is kind of a dual principle, but I think it's one of the very important ones to understand. It's the principle of resonance and dissonance. And the basic principle is if everything is based on spin, two spins, clockwise, anti-clockwise, and then all the varying kind of currents and waves and structures are, built on that. You have these two principles of resonance and dissonance. Resonance is literally spinning together, and dissonance is literally spinning apart. So when you take, two kind of anything in nature, and you have a sufficient degree of spinning together of those two, substances or forces or whatever, to whatever degree, or magnetic spins to whatever degree, then you have resonance. Resonance is spinning together. Dissonance is spinning apart. And so that's basically it. Those are all the seven principles of reality from my kind of philosophical, theoretical, practical kind of perspective. And I think that all the ways that I have kind of described these concepts in different ways on my Physics of Psychology blog, as well as my philosophy blog, which I can't access anymore because of Google, but I kind of developed the ideas. And then I have a whole number of videos, Nimpo Warrior G videos that really kind of, I think I may have deleted many of the philosophy ones, but this just summarizes all of the essential principles down to, this is it. This is my philosophy kind of reality. So that's about it. Thanks.